Back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Richie O'Leary of Happy Valley Insider, and today I'm joined again by my co-host, Dylan Callahan-Crawley, also of Happy Valley Insider, aka PennState.Rivals.com. Dylan, another official visit weekend is upon us. I guess the other one was technically an official visit weekend, where there's only one high school kid in Brent Arrington. But this weekend's a little bit more jam-packed.
Yeah, it's a star-studded weekend. You know, we're not too used to Penn State holding these big official visit weekends in mid-May, but here we are. Coming up here on the May 16th official visit weekend, and Penn State has nearly a dozen prospects on campus, and a majority of these prospects that are making it to campus this weekend are four-star prospects. Notably, if you are a subscriber over at Happy Valley Insider, I have been going over the latest on each Penn State official visitor over the last few days. First two parts are up. We'll have a part 3 soon. But part 1 includes this May 16th weekend. So if you read that article, probably going to be going over a lot of the same things that I covered in that article today. But if you haven't, whatever we say here today, we're going to have more on each of these visitors over at Happy Valley Insider, PennState.Rivals.com, where you can learn more on each of these official visitors coming into this weekend.
All right, let's jump into this visitor list. Start things off with the top. Wide receiver Brian Williams Jr. is coming up from Lake Mary, Florida. A little bit of a taller receiver, 6'4", 180. Yeah. Where do things kind of stand with him? He's a little bit of a newer name to the board.
Yeah, I got offered mid-April from Penn State. I think it was April 14th that they extended that offer to him. So definitely a newer name on the board for Penn State. But one that is definitely, worth keeping an eye on. Penn State has had a strong success in Florida in the past. Now, of course, their ace recruiter for Florida, Jaywan Sider, is no longer with the program, leaving for Notre Dame this offseason. That has, not stopped Penn State from recruiting Florida heavily in the cycle following his departure. But Williams, it seems to be a Penn State, perhaps Florida and Kentucky battle. I know he has an official visit to Florida listed on his profile here for May 30th. And before we got on, you did mention that Kentucky is also in the thick of this one for Williams as well. Penn State now has 3 receivers in their 2026 recruiting class after Davion Brown's commitment earlier this week. And they are hosting, obviously, a couple other wide receivers throughout the next few weeks, including Messiah Hampton, who we'll talk about today. And then you got Hayden Moore, the Minnesota commit, another one to watch. So I'm going to be very interested to see how the wide receiver room kind of breaks for Penn State here the rest of the way. I think they got 3 fantastic wide receivers in this class. I especially love the upside of Jazeer Rogers and Davion Brown. LeVar Keys has really good upside as well. So I think they got a really strong 3 there. And I'm interested to see if they add a 4th, who that 4th is going to potentially be for Penn State here going forward. Because you still got Hayden Moore. Like I said, you got Travis Johnson. He's still scheduled to visit Messiah Hampton, as we mentioned. So I have about 4 guys there that are kind of vying for maybe 1, maybe 2 spots, depending on who commits. Because if a guy like Travis Johnson or in a long shot Messiah Hampton comes around and says that they want to be a part of the class, I'm not sure I see Penn State turning those 2 down. But I think they would like to get 4 here if possible. So we'll see what happens with that going forward. But definitely an intriguing prospect here with Brian Williams. One that I'm going to be honest, I'm not too overly familiar with right now because he is a little bit of a newer recruit. But one we'll hopefully learn more about coming out this weekend.
Yeah, he's a little bit interesting. But you just mentioned Messiah Hampton, the big name, the 4-star out of New York. Not just New York, but out of Rochester, New York, a place that really doesn't produce talent at all. Right. And he's number 64 in the country. Yeah. Penn State's been after him for a while, but it sounds like, according to our friends over at On3, that he's kind of leaning elsewhere.
Yeah, it does seem like Messiah Hampton is leaning towards Oregon right now, at least according to Steve Wiltfong. It's not surprising. Hampton's just coming off an unofficial visit to Oregon over the weekend for the Mother's Day weekend. He's got an official visit scheduled there as well. I forget the date on that one, but he'll be back there for an official visit as well. It's Hampton's been a recruitment that Penn State offered early on in that process. Looked to be in a good spot early on, but as his recruitment picked up, their momentum really began to wane. First was, the Ohio States and Miami's. Now it's Oregon. I think Penn State's a long shot in that Messiah Hampton recruitment. Perhaps they can change that narrative this weekend, but I would not be holding my breath with Messiah Hampton. I imagine he'll end up at one of those R3 schools, and Wilt Fong is usually pretty reliable, so Oregon's probably a good bet. But NIL, it seems like, is going to play a decent factor in that recruitment, which, not a surprise if Penn State does. Not that Penn State's NIL is in a bad situation. I think it's actually in a better situation than many would believe it is right now, just because usually when you hear about Penn State and NIL, it's kind of in a negative light, but I think Penn State is very competitive in that field, but still very tough to go up against, Ohio State's, Oregon's, Miami's of the world. I mean, Miami, according, Pete Nakos just yesterday offered Jackson Cantwell $2.5 million just for, year one on campus. So, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to compete when other programs are throwing around, to steal a line from Philly's owner John Milliton, stupid money.
Fair. I mean, you look at his his visit list. Like, remember he canceled his Penn State visit in the spring to go down to Miami, so that obviously plays a factor. He's been to Miami multiple times. Like, he's going to Miami again on May 30th. Like, I think Miami's right there involved with him, but then he's going back to Oregon too. He was just at Oregon on May 10th. He was at Oregon in April. Like, if you look at the visits, it's just the two biggest NIL programs in the country, probably. Maybe not two biggest, but they're both very much out there and very open about spending money.
I'm assuming you're talking about Oregon, Miami there, and then Ohio State. It's not like they're any slackers when it comes to NIL as well. So I mean, it's a very tough. If NIL is going to be a factor as we anticipated going to be, as we've heard it's going to be, it stacks the cards even more against Penn State in that recruitment.
Yeah, so I have a hard time seeing this one happen for Penn State, but good to get him back on campus, see what you could do. Offensive lineman, only one this weekend, and it's Xavier Payne, who's actually been committed to Florida State since December, but seems like he's still kind of looking around because he's got multiple official visits scheduled.
Yeah, intriguing prospect, and like you said, multiple official visits scheduled here, but what makes him intriguing is one, just not only his size at 6'7", 330, but he is actually a native of upstate New York, which Penn State does usually pretty well with Northeast kids in recruiting. Doesn't obviously land each and every one, but they do well with those Northeast kids. So that does add a very interesting plot line in this recruitment. Does the idea of potentially coming back home closer to his native New York, is that appealing to him, or does he want to stay south in the South? Currently committed to Florida State right now, but like you said, has OVs elsewhere, Arkansas, Syracuse, Georgia. So definitely keeping his options open. Definitely has potentially, that interest in returning to the North with Penn State and Syracuse OVs, but Florida State and Georgia are going to make it, I think, difficult for him to leave the South. Georgia is especially interesting right now because, they just lost out on Jackson Cantwell. We have Penn as a interior offensive lineman, which at 6'7" is interesting. So I'm interested to see what Georgia has him as on their board. But with Georgia just losing Jackson Cantwell, does that cause Georgia to turn up the heat on other offensive line prospects such as Payne or Carter Scruggs, who is set to visit Penn State next month or at the end of the month?
He's interesting because the size. You want to say tackle more than anything, but either way, I mean, I guess it's possible he sticks with Florida State because that is his last official visit. But I don't really know how this one's going to play out. Obviously, if you were committed and solidly committed, and you don't even know what that Florida State staff, they could end up getting fired this year for all we know. So it's kind of wait and see, I guess, what they can do this weekend with him. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think it's wait and see. We'll try to get a read on this one coming out of the official visit weekend. Always tough with the committed kid. Not the only committed kid who is making a trip this weekend. So going to be very interesting here to see how this one goes. Has a strong relationship with Phil Troutwine, obviously. And I think, again, that being a native of the Northeast, this is one that piques my interest maybe a little bit more than a normal committed kid visiting Penn State.
All right, next up on the list, we got James Johnson at a Northwestern high school down in Miami, Florida. I believe that's Teddy Bridgewater's high school, isn't it?
I believe so. Yep. Just made the move down there from another Florida school. I think he's originally maybe closer a little bit more Central Florida. Don't hold me on that, but just made the move down to Miami and Miami Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean, playing for head coach and Teddy Bridgewater, NFL quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks in ACC history, I guess we could say that.
Yeah, for sure.
He got Louisville pretty far, yeah. All right. James Johnson, defensive tackle. This is the position that everyone complains and bitches about. Are they going to be able to pull one in that's a top 150 kid in the country?
Yeah, top 150 here on Rivals. Some places have On3 have a little bit higher, but we have him as a 4-star, number 138 in the country, top 10 defensive tackle, top 30 player in the state of Florida here. It's a good sign. Penn State is getting an official visit here from Johnson. Obviously, he's developed a really good relationship with Deion Barnes throughout his recruitment so far. But interestingly enough, our latest reports on Rivals, the Nittany Lions haven't really been mentioned as, a true contender. I think Adam Gorney had an article the other week, and he noted, Florida, Miami, Georgia, Syracuse, but really didn't mention Penn State there. So I'm interested to see. And Gorney usually has a pretty good, feel on the temperature of things. So I'm interested to see how big of a threat Penn State really is here. I think it's going to be hard for him to leave the South, kind of like with Payne. Florida, Miami, and Georgia are probably the 3 schools I look at here the most. Kind of very similar between Payne and Johnson in that aspect. But, I think, Penn State could make some noise here with a strong official visit, and they will have a strong official visit. And there's usually 1 or 2 kids per cycle that they usually kind of flip the script on. They come into an official visit, not really perceived as maybe a true contender or a legitimate chance to land somebody, and then they end up ended up doing so. Not a perfect example, but I kind of think back to Darius Dixon last year. Not really a guy that we perceived as being a Penn State kid coming into the visit in terms of, Penn State with an official visit here could, land Darius Dixon, but they blew him away on that official visit, and then he committed shortly afterwards. I think perhaps they could do similar. Johnson, not going to say that's what's going to happen, but I think they can make up some ground here on the other programs. I think Florida and Georgia are the ones here to watch particularly close, but we'll see what Penn State can get done here this weekend.
I'm also going to say Miami. I mean, down the street, obviously. Big time payday, so it makes the most sense.
Yeah, and willing to shell out money, as we have learned.
Already hinted at.
And I don't want to count out Syracuse. I mean, our good friend John Garcia just reported today that Johnson is really high on Syracuse as well. Which, you wouldn't really think about. But Syracuse has always had a decent, I think, footprint in Florida, no matter the coaching staff. But now you got one of the best recruiters in the country, and Fran Brown leading that program.
Elijah Robinson.
Yeah.
They got dudes on dudes.
Right. So, I mean, that's a really good program in terms of recruiters. So I don't want to count Syracuse either. I just think at the end of the day, it could be hard to beat the NIL that some of these Southern teams throw around. And now NIL isn't the end-all, be-all, but, these are all pretty good schools when it comes to developing talent. So if there's a deciding factor, it could very well be NIL. And sometimes it can be hard to say no to, an extra zero at the end or an extra, couple $100K, whatever it may be. Not sure what it's going to end up for James Johnson. But I'm sure he's going to get a nice NIL package no matter where he lands.
Speaking of NIL, linebacker Isaiah Williams has now decommitted once from Florida, where he
Yeah.
was committed from March till May, and now he's committed to Ole Miss since May 2nd.
Yeah.
He's now still going to take official visits to Penn State, Georgia, Florida, Colorado, Florida State. I'm just going to look at those schools, and I can tell you, at least for a fact, a couple of them are very NIL driven when it comes to recruiting. And when he
Yeah.
commits and decommits and commits and decommits, it's
Yeah, it's not a red flag, but it's a yellow flag in my opinion when you kind of have this flip flopping, and then you have all these official visits to the the usual suspects when it comes to NIL and such like that. Penn State, again, NIL is in a really good spot. They're competitive in that spot. They're going to be competitive against 98% of the country, if not 99% of the country, including some of the names out there for Williams. But I just don't see them getting into a bidding war if it gets that for Williams, which, again, looking at the official visits that he has lined up here, Florida, Georgia, Colorado, Florida State, it's hard to feel that this is not going to lean towards the NIL direction. He was already committed to Florida, flips to Ole Miss. I mean, it kind of, in my opinion, tells the story.
yeah.
So,
Very.
and this is after. I mean, this was after. Even in March, a lot of people thought that commitment to Florida was not set in stone, but was pretty solid. So, in a span of 5-6 weeks, that quickly changed, and I don't see a flip happening here for Penn State.
Yeah. Another top linebacker coming to campus, coming over from Ohio, Sincere Johnson.
Yeah.
A little bit of a not last minute addition, but more recent addition, I should say. What do we think of him? Because I believe he has a top list of Alabama, Ohio State, Penn State, but he's also taking other official visits too.
Yeah, and Ohio State's been the favorite here for a while. But you look, that is a pretty strong official visit list of Penn State, Alabama, Ohio State, USC. Somebody's going to get a damn good player.
Oklahoma's in there as well.
Oklahoma's in there. Okay, so we got to add that to his profile. But he did announce his top 3 of Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State recently. He has a strong relationship with Jim Knowles, who's been recruiting him since 8th grade. He likes Dan Connor. Penn State is linebacker U. That being said, Ohio State's been the leader here for what feels like forever. Maybe that Jim Knowles relationship, wins the day, but I'd be very surprised if he did end up at Ohio State right now. Just, has that extended relationship with Ryan Day, with James Laurinaitis.
And it's a tough thing to pull a kid out of Ohio that has an Ohio State offer.
As our good friend Marty likes to say, Ohio State, when it comes to Ohio prospects, has the right to first refusal. So, in my opinion, anytime there's
pretty good wording,
and it's funny because Ohio State, to a degree, has kind of been. They have not been perfect when it comes to their in-state recruiting lately. There's some guys that they've let leave the state that they never should let leave the state. But
true,
if they want a kid bad enough, I always assume that they're going to get that kid because it in Ohio, every kid who grows up playing football in Ohio wants to play for Ohio State.
It's just how it works, unfortunately.
It's just, and that's not to say it's not similar in Penn State, but it's in Pennsylvania, but it's not nearly the same level. Maybe as you get towards more the middle parts of the state, there's a lot of that, kids growing up wanting to play for Penn State. We've seen that with guys in the past like Bo Pabila, Tyler Elsdon, and a couple others, but you go toward closer to the cities, there's a lot more interest to explore other options. So I think it's going to be Ohio State for Sincere Johnson, but I'm more than willing to be surprised by Penn State if they can pull this one off. And that would start with a home run official visit this weekend.
Listen, I get the Jim Knowles thing, the connection there. I've been recruiting him for a while. I just Ohio kid, Ohio State, like he's been there 10 times already. Like,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
not think they're the favorite?
Right.
I think Futurecast already read in favor of Ohio State too for a long time, actually, since January.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also a 2-hour drive versus a 4-hour drive, which isn't a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. But if you want your family to come, it's a lot easier for them to make that 2-hour trip every weekend other than the 4-hour trip.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, let's move to DB. Dorian Barney, Georgia cornerback, coming up to campus, has a top 6 list of schools: Michigan, Colorado, Georgia Tech, UNC, Penn State, A&M. Very odd list for a Georgia kid. I mean, Georgia Tech makes sense in that category, but the rest is kind of sporadic across the country.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, Barney is actually. Is he the prospect who is originally from Pennsylvania? I believe so.
Yes, and also a former Bama commit at one time too.
Barney is from the Pittsburgh area, if I remember correctly. And there's always I mean, statistically it makes sense, but it is amazing how many kids Penn State does, end up recruiting pretty highly that are kids that are originally from the state of Pennsylvania who moved elsewhere. Part of that is by design, right? Some of these kids it's not like some of these kids just moved like 10 years ago. They moved recently. They were known prospects before their moves. Not sure when Barney made his move, but for most prospects, that's the case. So it makes sense, but it is interesting how many guys, how many prospects from Pennsylvania end up coming back for official visits. Though I would like to go back actually and check out the hit rate on those prospects in terms of Penn State being able to land those guys, because
the ones that leave campus, you mean?
Or
leave state?
Yeah, the ones who leave the state and they come back for official visits. I'd be interested to see the hit rate on that. Maybe that's something to go research here. But
yeah, it's an interesting one.
But I think Penn State is a contender here for Dorian Barney because of those in-state connections. Really strong, other 3 official visits here: Georgia Tech, A&M, and Michigan. Georgia Tech has become a really strong recruiting force down there in the Southeast under Brent Key. A&M sells itself. Michigan sells itself. I think if you're Penn State here, you sell the development at the position. You've been one of the best at development cornerbacks over the last decade. Texas A&M, I believe, has been the longtime favorite since the decommitment from Alabama. So can Penn State overcome A&M in that aspect? I think this is worth paying close attention to, but I do think it's going to be tough to beat A&M in that aspect. I think, if this is a pure development, then you want to get developed by the best. I think Penn State or Michigan here would be the answers, right? If other factors come involved, which I'm not saying NIL, but there's plenty of other factors that could be included, relationships, whatever it may be, then it's probably going to be, Texas A&M, Georgia could be I think Georgia is a legitimate threat as well, being kind of the hometown program out of these 4 as well. So I think Penn State is definitely a contender here. Probably a better contender than a lot of people would think, but definitely going to be hard to beat out A&M in this one.
Yeah. Let's try to get some positive news in here because it feels like it's just like, that one's leaning that way. That one's leaning this way. This one's already committed there. That one's committed there. It's an early official visit week.
Yeah, that's how I felt writing this as well. But I would also say we can leave the 2 big names for Penn State, at least, for last. And I think both those.
That's fine.
Both of those could be good news for Penn State on that aspect as well. But
so let's get through these other 2 real quick. Then we'll get to those 2 that are not leaning, so to speak, Penn State, but are pretty close to it.
Sure.
Cameron Hamel, I'm not sure if I'm getting that one right. Coming up from Arizona, top 4 list of schools: Nebraska, Oregon, Penn State, Texas A&M. I just feel like this is kind of a long shot here.
I think it's a long. I wouldn't necessarily say long shot. I think they're a better contender. They're a bigger contender than some would perceive here. Um, let's see. He has official visits to Penn State, Nebraska, Oregon, and Texas A&M here.
Yeah.
I believe Nebraska has been a favorite here for quite a while, but Oregon has been pushing quite a bit down the stretch here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, this is one of those things. If it comes down to development, I think Penn State has a tremendous chance of landing Hamel here. Uh, I mean, you look at what Terry Smith has done at cornerback over the last decade, and all he's done is produce NFL talent after NFL talent. Uh, Oregon, Nebraska, Texas A&M can't say that nearly to the extent that Penn State can. Oregon's developed some quality guys, but not as many as Penn State has, right? Um, so I think Penn State's is a bigger contender than people would assume coming into this one. Being a West Coast kid, you look at the other three schools; they're either Midwest programs or a West Coast program. I
Yeah.
do think it is on the longer shot side, but I think with a strong OV this weekend, they could kind of shift the momentum of this one and make this a really tough decision for him heading into next month. But my problem with this official visit weekend is if you don't get kids to commit in the next week or so coming out of this official visit,
See
you
ya.
risk losing all the momentum in the recruitment because it's going to be that probably then over a month until they eventually decide. I mean, he's on campus this
Mm-hmm.
weekend. His next visit isn't until June 6th, and then his last commitment is to June 20th weekend. So, I mean, by the time he makes a decision in late June, maybe mid July, you're talking almost 2 months removed from his Penn State official visit, which is that's a long time to go between official visit and a decision. And I feel like in those most cases that usually doesn't help out the program who had that uh, earliest OV.
Now, this isn't the case for everyone, but for the most part, when you look at like profiles and you see visit lists, not just official visit lists, but visit lists in general, and a kid from Arizona coming, now, mind you, he's from Indiana technically,
Yeah,
but he went to Arizona to play his high school ball. Hasn't visited Penn State before. I just feel like this is total long shot here. Could they convince him this weekend? Yes, but then when you hear A&M,
right,
Oregon,
right.
and then he's been in Nebraska lean for a while, it's just like Penn State seems to be sitting behind those other three at the moment. Could it change? Sure. Is it going to?
Yeah,
Jury's probably out.
yeah. I think they would have to have again. I said it before, a home run type weekend here to really make a true run. But I think at the very least they're going to make it a little bit interesting heading into those other official visits. The only question is will that momentum from the Penn State OV carry through the next three OVs after that?
Mm-hmm. Another one, Caden Hall, coming up from Florida, Milton High School down in Florida. Plays both sides of the ball. Plays basketball. Plays DB. Plays run first quarterback first team. I don't. Again, this is a tough one. Like when you see all those other visits and you're looking, this is a Florida kid. Then you see Bama, Florida, Florida State. I guess you could throw Oklahoma in that category too, but
Yeah.
like I just feel like it's impossible when you see multiple Florida visits or multiple Southeast visits to pluck these kids out of Florida. As long
No,
as those
yeah, it's
schools are willing
always
to take
hard.
him.
It's always hard to go in the South and pluck these kids, especially the ones who don't have ties necessarily to the Northeast. It's a little
Yeah,
easier to make those.
and it happens from time to time. Don't
Yeah,
get me
it
wrong.
does, and and it will continue to have for Penn State. I mean, Penn State has numerous Florida natives on their roster, um,
Mm-hmm.
but with Caden Hall, Alabama's been the favorite now for a while. Um, Florida, Florida State, Oklahoma all made strong pushes along with Penn State here. Penn State, you know, um, has quite a bit to sell from that safety perspective to Hall. Again, if development is key here, I it shouldn't really be a question, right? Nobody's
That
developed
let's
safety
be
starter,
honest here
but
though. How much is development really even playing a factor anymore?
um,
Just because of the amount of money.
I think
It's like
I think it depends on the
I think
kid.
it helps. Yeah, it helps a little bit with certain kids, but like it's all money related
A
now,
lot
and
of
it's
it
the first
is.
question these kids ask is like, how much am I going to
It
get paid?
is.
Like, okay, what the fuck? Like, you never been to Pennsylvania before. This is your first time here, and you're going to be like, hey, where's my paycheck? Like,
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for them to ultimately win this one. Just because you look at it, they're the only not as southern school, whether it's ACC or SEC, to be receiving an official visit here. He had that Florida State OV and he had a Florida State unofficial in April. Has an OV kind of in June to Florida State, Florida, Alabama, Oklahoma. It I think it's going to be hard to pluck him out of the South and the SECs, particularly. Alabama has been, I believe, the favorite here for a little bit now. Florida State, he's been to a crap ton, so can't count out those Seminoles there either. Adam Gorney did have an update on Canton Hall last month, which was that a lot of talk around Alabama and a lot of talk around Florida State. So I definitely think it's those two and then everybody else in Canton Hall's recruitment.
Yeah. Kyrie Adams just moved his official visit up to this weekend. What does that mean for Penn State? Do they have a shot at him? Or I shouldn't say do they have a shot at him, because we know they have a shot at him.
Big shot.
Do you think this couldn't be the difference maker, and could they land him this weekend?
Yeah, I think it was very strategic of them to move this official visit up to this weekend, because this one went from June 6th to today or to this weekend.
A couple weeks.
Yeah. So I think it's very strategic. You look at the other contenders: South Carolina, Notre Dame, Oregon. We saw what the Ducks did last year. I think Penn State's goal this weekend is to turn that pressure up to 10 out of 10 on Adams and try to get a commitment sooner than later out of the 4-star prospect. I think you could survive obviously that South Carolina official visit. I think they could survive all of these if push comes to shove, but I think the goal here is to get a commitment before he gets on campus at Notre Dame or especially Oregon, because we know what Oregon could do on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, that's true.
So I like where Penn State sits. I think, yeah, I think they're going to turn up the pressure here for a commitment in the upcoming weeks here, and if they get it, it would be a tremendous landing for them in this class. That already a top 5 class on rivals would only strengthen it in that regard. Yes, I like this idea by Penn State a lot to move this one up, and we'll see if they can get it done.
All right. Last but not least, one of the best in state, safety Joey O'Brien, is coming to town again after just being on campus back on April 18th for an unofficial, is back for his official visit this weekend. We know it's been a 2-horse race for the most part between Penn State and Notre Dame. How big of a weekend is this for Penn State, and is there a chance they get this one done? I feel like it's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to be tough to get it done, but I think they're hoping they can get it done. I mean, but this recruitment has changed so many times in terms of who's leading between Penn State and Notre Dame. I think you could realistically, look at it any given week, and the leader may be different. At the end of the day, Clemson, Oregon, Tennessee, Ohio State are also involved, but I think this is Penn State Notre Dame battle going into the the home stretch here, and Penn State. They probably would have liked to get this official visit a little bit closer to decision time. But, you got to play the cards you want or play the cards you have. And they're going to have to hit a home run this weekend, as I've said many times already today. And they're going to have to hope that it lasts through the next month. They've been selling O'Brien on not just being a star safety for them, but also playing wide receiver. The Travis Hunter effect, as you maybe want to call it, which could definitely, I think strengthen their case to land O'Brien. But as I said in my preview for the official visit weekends, I think there's going to be a little bit of a wild one going into the home stretch, and just to buckle up, because this one could be a wild ride here before he makes his decision, because. As much as I think it's Penn State and Notre Dame, Oregon has a lot to sell. Clemson has that previously established relationship with Tom Allen. And then Ohio State isn't, Being the defending national champions isn't a bad selling point, and they develop safeties pretty well as themselves. So I think it is a Penn State Notre Dame battle, but I think this is going to have some twists and turns here over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with that. But not a great synopsis of everything. It doesn't sound too positive, but again, it is an early weekend for Penn State.
Yeah.
It's an early weekend for
And
everyone.
here's the other thing. There's almost 70 official visitors over the course of the next month.
Yeah.
They have 17 commitments.
Sure.
They have maybe room for 10 to 13 more kids, depending on how many they want to take this class. I mean,
it's true.
At best, you're probably only talking about hitting on about 15% of these 70 prospects. So, I mean, yeah, most of these cases are not going to be, favorable for Penn State. But you keep your options open here and see what happens.
I think the May 30th weekends when we'll see a little bit more of Penn State favor, just because you have a lot of guys that are pretty close to leaning Penn State. You have one that is leaning, or multiple that are leaning Penn State. And a bunch of the commits are going to be on campus. Almost every commit, actually.
Yeah.
Is going to be
and
on
while
campus.
There's always surprises in official visits, I feel like we could sit down right now and I could probably tell you who. If I gave you the next 10 to 13 kids to commit to Penn State to fill out this class,
mm-hmm.
I would feel confident that I would probably hit on 80, 90% of those kids. Maybe there's always going to be one or two surprises, but yeah. I think we have a pretty good feeling of who's going to round out this class over the next couple weeks. And fortunately means Penn State's going to probably miss on a couple of these kids, but some of them aren't true misses. Some of these kids aren't, takes right now for Penn State. Not saying this week in particular, but overall, not all 70 kids are going to be takes. So,
Gun to your head, do they get someone this weekend?
Do they pick up a commitment this weekend? I would probably say I'd probably no, but I think they land at least one kid from this weekend.
One eventually, just not immediate.
Yes, at least one. I'll be honest. Okay. I think they can. I think they have a good chance at landing both O'Brien and Adams over the course of the next several weeks. I'd probably honestly lean. I don't know who I'd lean towards. Maybe more towards Adams right now.
I was going to say I lean Adams more than anything. I just think O'Brien's been too wishy-washy. If he wanted to stay home, he would have done it already. But now, that being said, they did just have the number 3 overall draft pick from his same exact high school. So.
Right. So I think they land at least one kid out of this weekend. Eventually, I think 2 has a good chance. But I don't see any immediate commitments coming from this group. Beyond Kari Adams and O'Brien, I would say
Williams, maybe. It depends if they want to be, if they're not that picky and they're like, screw it, take them as a receiver.
Yeah, I'd say beyond those, I would watch out for the Dorian Barney, Hamill. I think they're playing catch up. I was confusing Hamill in the back of my head with another cornerback that they recruited highly, who's also, funny enough, has Nebraska included, which is because he's Nebraska committed, which is C.J. Brona out of Florida.
That's not till the
20th of June.
Yeah.
But I think they're a contender in that one. Hamill, they're playing catch up, so I wouldn't say him, but I think Dorian Barney would be another name to watch this weekend. So I think those three are the 3 big guys, and then you see what you can do with Sincere Johnson and James Johnson. So those would be the 5-6 guys that I'm paying close attention to this weekend out of this group. Xavier Payne is up there as well, just because of those Northeast ties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not like too exciting this weekend. Like I said, in a couple weeks we'll have a much more exciting podcast for that weekend. I think that's actually Memorial Day weekend they're off, and then they'll have the May 30th weekend.
Yeah, and I think it's also
one.
important to note that official visits anymore are not just about now. Official visits now are about building and continue to build that relationship for potentially later. You know,
That's true
Penn
too.
State has, like we said, like 70 kids visiting.
Some
Out
crazy
of those
number like
70
that.
kids, there's probably a good chance that nearly half of them at some point enter their transfer portal in their careers. You know,
Very true.
there's no statistics behind that. That's just like a little bit of a blind guess, but a significant amount of these prospects will enter the transfer portal. And if they do, Penn State's going to have those established relationships. These prospects will have visited Penn State before in their recruitment, and perhaps it works out down the road more than it does now.
Yeah, so we'll wait and see. But that's really all we got for this weekend. Stay tuned for more updates on our boards on the Lions Den forum on pennstate.rivals.com. Anything else? I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, on the recruiting side, I think that's pretty much it. Circa did release their Big Ten win odds today.
I saw that.
Penn State set at 10 wins over under, is second in the Big Ten. I guess third if you want to count Ohio State and Oregon, who are tied at 10.5. I like Penn State to hit that over. Gotta be honest. I think 11-1 is right now my prediction for the regular season, and I like that over for Penn State for sure.
So Oregon or Ohio State is the big question mark. Which one do you have them losing?
Right now, I'd lean more.
Or do you have UCLA just coming out of nowhere?
No, if I had to guess right now, it would be Ohio State. Just it's one of those things. I think Penn State could be the better team this year, but it's one of those things where you kind of have to. At this point, you have to prove to me you can beat Ohio State before I'm going to pick them to beat Ohio State. So I'd probably pick Ohio State right now to beat them, but I like Penn State at 11-1 here on that win over. Some notables: Maryland 4.5 wins, which continues my feelings that Mike Loxley is on his way out, which means Zion Ely's recruitment may not exactly be over.
That's true. Very true. Right.
Michigan 8.5 wins. Indiana 8.5 wins.
I'm shocked by that Michigan number.
Washington has 7.5, which just makes them puts them at number 6 in the conference.
They are
tied for 6.
Right there.
So
I think that's pretty spot on. Some of these numbers are interesting because a lot of these teams are going to be bowl eligible, I think.
Yeah, there's an interesting group in there of Washington, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, USC, Minnesota, Michigan State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin, who are all projected between 5.5 and 7.5 wins. So
yeah, it really just depends on how things play out. It is an interesting list, though, nonetheless. Let's see. So as of right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 technically bowl eligibility. And then if you go probably 3 in the playoffs again, if you include Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State. So we'll just have to wait and see how the season plays out. Yep. But that is for a different time and a different podcast. But for me and Dylan, that is another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.